We have a couple of questions we were going to just ask the panelists to get started with, and then we'll open it up to the audience to ask questions. So the first burning question we have is, why did you join the military? So you guys can pick what order you go in, but give us a little bit of what was going on in your life and what steered you towards the military.
Yeah, I can start. So I played tier 1 hockey all through high school. And at the time, women's D1 scholarships weren't really a thing. I realized, come from a working class family and realized that student loans were a real thing and I wasn't going to be able to go to college just right out the gate. So that's why I joined the service, definitely to pay for college. And here I am 10 years later. I guess it worked out. But it was definitely one of those things where I had not thought about it. It was not a calling for me. It was a happy accident. So
I was in high school and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I came from a farm family. Nobody had gone to college, but I knew that there was something better out there. I didn't know what it was. And I grew up with going to playing in band for the Memorial Day parade and going to the cemetery. And I knew Gold Star parents. So I think that had some impact on me, that I felt like it was okay to go in the military. So I signed up the year before I graduated from high school. And 2 weeks after I graduated, I was shipped off to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And the military, I really believe the military did more for me than what I did for it, because I was able to get an education. I met people that told me I could go to college. I was college material. And I used the college fund to build on my LPN so that I could become a BSN. And then I'm just really proud to work for Michigan Medicine.
Like the other panels, I came from a working class background as well. I mean, no one in my family had gone to college. Both my parents had served in the military and during the Vietnam era, and it was an option where college wasn't. I hadn't any real idea how I would pay for school. Got into U of M and had no idea how I was going to pay for it. And student loans were a thing. When I graduated, I didn't have a job. That was, and because the military was an option and not having a job was also a thing. And they were interested in me coming to them. That was, it wasn't one of those ideas where it was like not even a consideration. So that was why I went down and talked to them once. It wasn't a matter of graduation and not having a job and going and finding a job in any field. It was something that was in my wheelhouse to be considered because my parents had served.
And then I guess for you, Susan, so you have two different careers in the military. So what prompted the second and third iterations?
The first one, I went to college right out of high school, and I went to my first year. I was totally bored. It was not what I expected. My parents paid for the first year, and they were like, "Yeah, we can't afford this," which is why I went down and talked to the Navy recruiter to begin with. And again, because my parents had served, it was an option. When I got done with my first iteration and went to college the second time, I had the college fund. The college fund didn't pay for everything, which is how I ended up with student loans. But going to college, and my peers were really interested in a lot of things that I wasn't. And my studies weren't super challenging to me. That was kind of the Navy was an idea, way to kind of get out of that and do something.
All right, so here's your chance to talk about some about the challenges that you faced while you're in the military. So they could be challenges, due to your background, your identity, your gender. You pick.
I need a second when you're ready.
I think one of the challenges for me, I was really young and I had a communication between, say, the base where I was and being in contact with home was really traumatic to me. I'm always happy that the soldiers nowadays can communicate even with their cell phones to communicate home and let their family know that they're okay. Because there's this one particular episode that had what happened when I was in Desert Storm. They would ship us to a call center site. It was like a big mobile home with different, and you'd have to wait in line for like an hour just to call and talk to your parents to tell them that you were still alive, and you get like 3 minutes. So I remember waiting in line with my husband at the time, and an alarm went off and we had to take cover. And it's like people were actually, do they take cover or do they stay in line and take cover and lose their place? And that really got to be a thing where people would just stay in line when the sirens are going off because you were so desperate to communicate. But otherwise, I have to say, I don't believe I felt any sexual harassment. Of course, you have your typical young kid, stupid things that happen. But I always felt like I was protected by my leadership. And my leadership was I was always in a medical hospital unit or evacuation hospital. And I did feel really safe.
You know, when I was thinking about this morning, and I was saying this to you about, do you talk about the positives or the negatives, because there are both, right? When I served in the Army, and I was enlisted, so there was a difference between the officer experience, I think, and the enlisted experience. And being in the Signal Corps, I was in an area where I was mostly amongst male soldiers. There were very few female soldiers in the places that I served in the jobs that I did. And while I was seen as one of the guys in the sense that I pulled my own weight, there were women around in areas that weren't necessarily seen in the same way. And I found in some senses when I was a lower enlisted soldier and a junior NCO, I would have to deal with some of those junior soldiers and discipline them. And then when I became a senior NCO, I was part of the establishment. And I had to really balance the roles, the expectations of how I was seen. Do I fulfill the role as a senior NCO? Do I fulfill the role as a female? Do I fulfill the role as a leader? Do I fulfill the role as a human being? And sometimes that was tough. I would have to counsel junior soldiers in ways that I didn't always agree with because I was part of the leadership of the establishment, and there was a role there that I had to play. I still struggle with that because I don't always feel like I had the best interest of the person that I was counseling at heart. That's not always a positive feeling. That was one thing I had to deal with being in the Army. Being in the Air National Guard, I feel like I haven't had to deal with that as much because it's a cultural shift. It's a difference in the service. The leadership and the culture in that particular service is different. And I struggle with that. Would it have been different if I had stayed in one service my whole career? Probably. Is that something that I have to deal with because I bought into the culture and I'm here and I'm buying in because I want to serve and I want to get to retirement? Yes. It's not always a positive.
So I will say one of the challenges for me personally, being in the Marine Corps, where there are 183,000 Marines and only 9,000 are female, is definitely there's definitely a gender gap there. And since we're on the women in the military panel, I'll gladly talk about that. At 18, you go in with a very naive outlook that you can work your way out of that gendered stereotype. In my experience, I found that to be untrue. It didn't matter working 2 to 3 to 4 times as hard. Your accolades were never as substantial as your male counterparts. So that was a big thing for me. And I deployed and did a Western Pacific tour. So Japan, Malaysia, Korea, 2013 to 14. And in our unit of just over 200 pilots, maintainers, comms and stuff like that, we had 3 females who seemed to be at the center of issues that weren't real issues for them, who seemed to be outlets for negativity and had a fairly difficult time rising through our ranks. For me, I was lucky enough to pick up rank fairly quickly and was a sergeant NCO when we deployed. So it's a little bit of a easier task, but still, for me, it was that. And for me, it was watching people that have been in 20 years that refuse to change the culture. After 4 or 5 years, it feels like you're just screaming at a brick wall for change. And I'll be honest with you, that's what pushed me to get out. So.
Any follow-up? Or from the chat? All right. Our next question is, what is most difficult about your transition? So you can either consider that your transition from being a civilian to in the military, or from the military back to a civilian, or Susanna, for you, I guess, maybe all, between all the services. So pick which transition you want to talk about, or all of them.
I mean, honestly, I think the biggest transition I think is going from being a civilian to being, or going from being in the military to being a civilian. You get trained when you go into the military, you get 6, 12, 18 weeks training to become a military member. You don't get that training when you leave. You get maybe a transition at the end of your service, maybe. Here's a resume workshop, here's how you do a job search. See you later, here's a check, maybe. Here's some time off to go find a house or a job or something, maybe. And there you're left to go do your own thing. I still struggle a little bit with that. What are the expectations? I still go to my civilian job sometimes and I struggle with what are the expectations really as a female, as a professional, as, how do you interact with your civilian peers? What are the expectations? How do you speak to people? How do you create those relationships with them that you know that they respect you as a professional and that you respect them? There aren't those milestones that you get in the military that they know you know what you're doing. That's tough sometimes, and it's still tough, and I've been off of that active role for 4 years now. That's still a thing.
Well, I have to say honestly that I did get my LPN license in the military. So when I got out of the military, I knew I could work as an LPN. And I started searching out schools to start my education. I was only on active duty for 6 years, and everything fell into place, really. I guess I had thought about what I was going to do when I got out, and I knew when it was time to get out. And school and guidance counselors helped me through that beginning phase.
So for me, the transition out was difficult because it came with a lot of resentment for the 5 years that I'd spent in. Going back to undergrad, I went back with the intention of going pre-med, but you don't have to have any specific major to go to medical school. So I figured I'd major in political science because that seemed fun. But I was lucky enough to meet a female role model now, Dr. Ashley English, who helped me somewhat process the workings of the military and how government operates and how rules and procedures are followed. And I think the transition out 3 years later, examining those processes kind of gave me a better look as to how I was failing while I was in a sense. Failing not in the sense of not doing well at my job or not running as fast as I needed to, but failing in the sense of not feeling a sense of personal accomplishment or a sense of progression, rather stagnation when I got out. And that transitional period really helped me. So honestly, coming back into the civilian world, I didn't necessarily take a lot of the services that are offered to veterans, because that wasn't something I identified with at the time. I didn't feel good about being a veteran, so those weren't avenues I pursued. So my progression out into the civilian world was more based in academia and research, and that's what's helped me transition back.
Any follow-up questions?
We have one asking about, related to this latest one, and there's another one too later on, a question, but were there any male exceptions were there any male officers or NCOs who got it and who showed leadership in managing gender integrated?
I know good Marines. I know good male Marines that want to get it. But when you're in an institution that doesn't allow you to prioritize your own morals, it's hard to put those into application. So yeah, there are male exceptions. I know some of the relationships I have with male Marines that I served with, I'll have till the day I die. Does that mean they self-sacrifice as often as people like to think in the service? I don't think so.
I would absolutely agree. In both the Army and in the Air Force, there were absolutely good male service members in both of those. But again, they're not self-sacrificing. They're not sticking their neck out.
But the institution shouldn't put them in that spot to begin with. So let's also establish that.
How about we take a couple other questions from the audience, both online and in the room, if you have questions.
Well, I guess going off with that, somebody asked, Nicolette asked this online. For public response, what changes would you want to see in the military and veteran affairs to make things better for women and non-binary people?
In the Veterans Affairs divisions?
Veteran affairs and in the military.
In the service.
Both.
Well, trust me, like I'm slowly working on policy analysis of those programs. And I'm here at the University of Michigan to try and find a sustainable reason or way to fix them. So when I know, you'll know. But definitely we have to, I will say just a little bit on the last question too. I had female Marines that did the same thing, that prioritized career and service over fellow female Marines. And until it's in a more inclusive environment than that, especially with, and I did serve partly during Don't Ask, Don't Tell and after as well. Those cultural shifts have to become prevalent before we'll see any tangible difference.
So where does culture shifts come from? Who does this?
I mean, my branch was started in a bar, so it's really an old boys club.
And I would agree with you in some respects. A lot of people will tell you it's a leadership issue. When you have good leadership, where that comes down from the top that says, we are not going to tolerate this, the folks below them know that if they're not following the party line, so to speak, it's not tolerated. If you have leadership that tolerates the shenanigans, for lack of a better way of putting it, then it happens. I've had leaders that don't tolerate it, and it's not tolerated, and it's punished. And then you have leaders that tolerate that, and it flourishes. It's a matter of, do you allow it or do you not? When it's allowed, it's a terrible place to serve. And unfortunately, I hate to say it's as simple as that, but in some respects, it's as simple as that.
Suzanne, Regina, and Vanessa, what advice would you give someone who is going into the military right now? Goes to the military right now. It's a different time, 2021, not just starting now. Thanks.
Do you want to start?
Yeah, I can. So I would say know what you want out of it. If you're gonna go, first I would say, what are your other options? Please consider those. Especially if you're going in as enlisted personnel. But for me, the service is gonna get everything they can out of you. So make sure you go into it with a personal goal of something that you can come out with, whether it be a deliverable or a skill set before going in. I went in aimlessly, I won't lie to you. Like, I had no idea I was gonna work on F-18s, and I happened to be good at it and do well while I was there. And those qualifications led me to an electrical engineering job on surgical microscopes once I got out. So things like that, I think, are important to consider before just going in.
I feel like an old veteran. I was told when I talked to another gal that from my hometown area that went in the military, keep your head down and don't draw any attention to yourself, which I found to be very, very sad advice. I would say, I agree totally with Vanessa, know what you want, keep your head up and excel and stand out and make the experience a great experience, and make changes. And when you feel that it's time to get out and pursue something else, go with your gut instinct and just forge forward with your life.
I think I agree with both of you. If you're going in enlisted particularly, exactly what Vanessa said, know what you want to get out of this, out of the experience. Don't go in general, know what you want, go in with an idea of what you want to do as far as a skill set or a job. Don't let them steer you to a particular pathway, because they're going to get what they want out of you as a warm body. You want to maximize what you get out of the experience. But again, I would also agree, don't go in, keep your head down to a certain extent, but also don't allow that to be abused. Because I think sometimes we allow ourselves to be abused, and we don't have to be abused, if that makes sense. But again, I also don't look up at 10 years and say, oh, I'm going to stay in 10 more years because I've done 10. That's not the only way to go about doing things either. And take the benefits that you've earned. I know that we look up and don't necessarily always consider ourselves to be veterans, and then we don't utilize the benefits that we've earned. I think that's something that we still kind of look up and say, oh, we have these benefits. I didn't realize that. And I think that's something that I would keep reiterating. You have earned these are benefits that are something that you need to take advantage of.
We have other questions online.
Just another question asking of, talking about well-engineered integrated teams overperform all male and female teams, all male or new business, as well. And they're just kind of using on who was needed to lead the switch to the ultimate competitive advantage. Other militaries do it. We haven't yet. So I think we answered part of that. Is there any other questions of the flight team? Other statements on how change is affecting military or VA? We answered that.
Kind of, right? I think it's hard. It's hard, and I know you guys have been out, not obviously a few years, but a little bit longer for you. It's a different service from political term to political term. And the way the military is polarized, to be a political identity with the Republican Party, and that mentality of it, that has to kind of dull down, in my opinion. It has to be a bipartisan agreement that these things are important and need to be addressed. So when you look at sexual assault prevention in the service or things like that, that do a more gendered, those programs are huge when you look at how they affect gender and things like that. When you look at programs like that, you look at senators like Claire McCaskill from Missouri who fought and like led to change legislation and then was ousted because it didn't seem any change to the military was seen as a negative way and lost in her next election. But when you look at good leaders like that actually take charge, it's important that we put those people, we prioritize those people in elections to help us change the actual policy the way it's written. And to change those programs and to effectively say that, hey, if you do put your neck out of the line to create a better, more inclusive culture, you won't be ostracized for it.
And I think that's correct. I think it has to be bipartisan. It needs to be on both sides of the aisle, with sponsorship on both sides of the aisle. And that if there's a change on one side or the other, that gets carried forward, whether it's Republican or Democrat. I don't think that needs to be depoliticized, because at the end of the day, it's a leadership issue that needs to be carried forward across the board. And again, like you said, it's not just a party issue, it's across the board and it's across the services. It's not just a Marine Corps issue or an Army issue or a Navy issue. It goes across the board, and whether it's more of an issue or less of an issue in one or the other of the services, it's still an issue across all 5 of the services. More or less prevalent, it's still a problem. And it needs to be recognized and dealt with. And it becomes a leadership issue that needs to go from the Joint Chiefs of Staff down, or the Commander-in-Chief down, whether it's a Democratic Commander-in-Chief or Republican.
And one aspect that comes with that is the service needs to allow itself to be vulnerable and have independent organizations evaluate efficiency. Self-regulation is obviously not working. So there has to be some aspect of outside governance that allows and enables the service to progressively move forward.
What service were you in?
I was in the Marine Corps.
Oh.
Yeah, rah, rah, rah. Mhm.
Army.
Where you serve?
Me? VMFA 112 out of Fort Worth, F-18.
Were you Paris or Hollywood?
I'm so sorry?
Were you Paris or Hollywood?
Definitely Parris Island. Females only went to Parris Island then.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I think the 1st battalion went to San Diego like a year ago of women, and they just integrated in, so.
I was in
Yeah, nope, my only California experience is 29 stumps, so,
so you're in-
yeah,
I'm sorry.
yep.
And,
I was in the US Army, the Army.
Army?
I was in the Navy and the Army and the International.
So when I was in Iraq, a big part of our intelligence, like cabinet, actually came from all the women that were basically attached to us that would talk to the other women because we could speak, and they had all the intel. From your experience, when it comes to like what really goes on, like when you deploy and all that stuff, what's been like the biggest insight that you've got from like being like a minority amongst the majority, but you knew everything that was going on? Really nice. All the good stuff, and especially the Marine
So for me, I think you don't realize how, like, we look at our branches of service and we realize we're not like a gender equitable community in the Marine Corps. But it really hit home just how far we are in comparison to the rest of the world in Malaysia, where we went and worked with their Air Force to fix their jets that had been down. And four of us technicians went over to help, and 3 of them were male, and then there was me, and everybody got a handshake, and then I was at the end, and they were like, shh, psych, nope. And that's not their thing there. They don't let women serve. They don't. So I turned around to walk away because I don't need to help you fix your jet, right? But my sergeant then was a little bit more persuasive to finish that job. But you realize things like that, obviously a lot while you're overseas. What I really realized too is that there's no access to like adequate healthcare when we were I was in Iwakuni, Japan, and if I needed to see an OB, or if any person needed to see an OB, that was a 3-hour train ride up to Atsugi, and it's just things like that you don't think about in an all-male cohort, that were a little bit challenging when I deployed, so.
That's interesting. I was always in a medical unit, so there were a lot of females and males, and then, so I can't relate to what you went through, you know. I was very fortunate.
And I would say the same thing, being signal in the Army and being intel in the Air National Guard, being deployed all over the Middle East, the same thing. I never experienced a feeling of inclusion where if I was working with, local national troops or local nationals in any way, it was always, I'd take my helmet off and it was always oh my God. It was always we don't want to work with you, or we don't want to deal with you until we need a translator. When we need a translator, it was on. It was always, hey, go get Freakley. We need you. Hey, Sergeant Freakley, can we get you to go to Kuwait City? Can we get you to come with us on this convoy? We need you to go in this house. We need you to deal with these females. But until then, they didn't want to deal with me at all. And that was okay, but it wasn't okay, right? I didn't mind when we were in Iraq and they needed me to work with females, local national females, because we were looking for intel, but it wasn't good when they needed me to go on a parts run, right? Because then I'm on a convoy with people working for parts, looking for whatever it was, and I had no idea what the heck they were asking me to buy. But they needed me because I could speak the language. And the only reason they needed me is because I could speak the language, was because I did a degree here as a civilian before I went back in. But they didn't want me as an intel guy, right? They wanted me as a signal guy. But I needed that signal overview. And so it was interesting for me because I wanted to go in as an intel guy, right? Because I could speak the language and I had the cultural background, and hey, this would be really useful. But the Army didn't view that and said, man, we don't want you to do that. We want you to be a signal guy because you need the $65,000 student payout. So, because they knew better, they put me in that signal corps unit. But when we went to Iraq, man, they were like, oh, you got this code for this language? Well, hey, we need you, right? So I ended up doing all kinds of craziness that I wasn't trained for. But, at the end of the day, I did stuff that I shouldn't have been doing. But I'm glad I did it. I was able to provide some stuff for the guys that were, kicking the doors. But there was in no way, shape, or form was I supposed to be doing any of that stuff, right? I didn't have any background. But was it useful? Am I proud to have been able to do some of that? Absolutely.
Yeah, we got, so I'm on Puerto Rico, and we got most of our intel from the women in especially when we took religion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like we're all in that category from, talking about like the tribes.
I was in Iskandria, that's to say, that's where they pulled us out of Iskandria to do stuff like that. And no, I had no idea what I was doing, like they knew language skills.
Any other questions? I got one more. Okay. So how can your experiences translate into teachable moments?
We're here.
When you say you're here, okay, so expand a little bit.
This opportunity, right? I mean, how many times have you had I've never really had an opportunity to sit and have an experience to sit with other women like this and discuss things like this. And be able to say not only we were able to serve, but, you know, it was positive and negative, and we got to come back and say, you know, we did this and here we are, you know. And so I think that in that respect, it's the teachable moment. Know what you want, know what you know, take the opportunity when it presents itself, but know what you're giving up to do that.
Do you have anything?
No.
So I think for me, teachable moment, like from my personal experience, is that time in taught me how to not be a leader and how to be a leader. It gave me a lot of bad examples to pull from and a lot of things that were legitimately out of my control. So I think it gave me a better interpretation of what I can and can't control outside of the military, whether it be in a school setting or whatnot. It gave me the opportunity to figure that out really early in life, what I don't want. And it allows me to create a better environment now because of it. So whether that be me in a school setting, or I also coach women's hockey, that opportunity has like really allowed me to translate into set expectations too for a younger generation of what is and isn't acceptable, and how to move forward in that. So that was my teachable, like what I got from it. What I teach people, like my teachable moment is that I need to know what I want out of things. And you need to know what you want out of things before you get it. Don't come to college aimlessly because you're 18 and that's what you think you should do. And I think that's what I've really pulled from my time in the service and what I try and tell younger people that are going in that same route.
I was so young when I went in the service that I really didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how to act. Social skills probably were really poor. And it taught me that I can believe in myself and trust my instincts. And if you want to excel in something, you have a dream that you really can accomplish anything that you want to, no matter where you came from, how intelligent you think you are. You can do anything that you want to do. Because I rose up from a 4-generation German family that nobody went to college, farmers, and the military did give me the opportunity to excel and to take those skills and excel in my life as a nurse here at Michigan Medicine.
Are there any other questions?
So, what do you, what I've seen in the military a lot, I mean, my military experience was about 88 to 92, and then 92 to 95, as far as the reserve service, drilling reserve after duty. Seen tremendous changes since before while I was in, first female fighter pilot for a while I was there. In more and more upper administration, and more command ranks, women commanding ships, commanding fighter squadrons, commanding platoons. Iraq, Afghanistan, for better or for worse, I mean, we saw soldiers dying in combat. We saw folks being decorated, somebody with a gold star for a role in combat. And it's just, there's going to be more and more. This is, with military tests that are getting harder, fitness tests that are getting harder, for just being fit. I think, the writings are all going to more women in all spots. What do you think the challenges and the hopes are for the future? Like, what do you hope? I guess maybe what do you hope will be the, if we come back here and talk about, we have you or some folks like you, the next generation of dispatch women out on the diag who are ROTC officers. I mean, going to be officers, they're ROTC cadets. So they'll be serving, and hopefully 20 years from now, we'll bring them back when they're already retired. What do you hope they say? What do you think they will, like, challenges they will face along the way? There. What do you hope they will say? Sorry.
I hope that we're looking at more of a fully integrated force where their talents are utilized, more fully than we are today, and a lot more fully than we were when I first went in. I hope that we're not still talking about the sexual assault and the sexual harassment and the underutilization of our female service members that we're still talking about, and that we were talking about in 1987 when I first went into the service. I hope we're not still talking about underutilization across the board as far as talent goes. I hope we're still not talking about sexual harassment and sexual assault statistics and underreporting statistics that we're still talking about. I listen to Vanessa and my heart breaks because it's better than it was when I went in. And I know that from being in Airedale, in aviation like you are, and just the problems that you must have suffered and faced just from my service to your service, I know that there are issues. I hope we're not still talking about that across the different services. That's my hope.
Okay. So I hope I see less tokenism. Those accolades that you have described are firsts, and those are still so few and far between. There's still less of an equitable division there. And when I think about it, I'd also like to see less of a gap between me and my female African-American counterparts in the service. There needs to be more representation and more acknowledgement of intersectionality before I can really hope for anything else. Yeah, it'd be nice to not talk about sexual harassment and sexual assault, but that's not going away for a long time until somebody actually rectifies the system, until the culture change comes with it. And in order to have a paradigm shift like that in the service, it has to start at leadership, but it also has to stop filtering from the bottom up. For me, when I joined in 2009, I got told real quick, WM doesn't stand for Women Marine, it stands for Walking Mattress. There are things like that, and there are these, and those are, I got that from my female drill instructors, 3 of which had combat action women, and at the time, females weren't allowed into combat, and it's things like that, like those are accomplished female Marines, and you come in and they tell you, like, no, just get ready. Not, no, hey, let's change this, not like, no, you're worthy, like, here's how you value your self-worth, and you take that into your unit and you push that in through the service, you get prepared and set up for those hardships. And I think until you recognize that that comes from both ends, it's gonna be hard for me to hope for anything. So. Sorry, that was really negative,
No,
but
no, no, it needs to be said.
Jeez, Marie.
I mean,
Marine honesty, I love it. No, absolutely, I think it needs to be said, and you're right, you're totally right, it's disgraceful.
yeah, and it's crazy too, because you look at leadership, and so I served with a reserve unit, and those pilots are literally a good old boys club in the sense of they don't accept reserve pilots unless those pilots are really willing to sacrifice. A lot of them work for FedEx and UPS and stuff off the clock. So when they deploy, it's a pay cut, but it's one of those things that, are you willing to do this? And then we'll allow you to retire, for the service and fly private. My unit was one of the first to make every hop. So when you do a Westpac, you hop from island to island on time. Our jets are 7,000 hours, which are 3,000 past high flight. So we're doing what we need to, and we're excelling with equipment that we shouldn't even have and things like that. It was so frustrating for the Marine Corps to see a reserve unit do well that when we got back, they disbanded our pilots for, some of them didn't have Marine Corps training, like doing MCIs and things like that. So they disbanded them and moved them across the country. And that's just a leadership failure in the Marine Corps. Not necessarily a gender-based one, but it's things like that. Like, there are large issues, and it's hard to, when you're in a branch of the service where you're supposed to be self-sacrificing, when you have a personal attack that's based on an identity such as gender or sexual orientation, it seems less important. And I think we need to realize that those are still very important. So I'll get off my soapbox now, though.
All right, we have just a few minutes left. Is there anything else that you wanted to discuss and final messages you want to leave with us today?
It's something they always wanted to say, especially if you're another Marine.
I mean, my filter was gone a year before I got out, so my filter was long gone, like a year before I got out. I won't lie to you, you get into an institution like that. So for me, I didn't care how fast I ran. I didn't care what my PFT score was. I cared that I could teach Marines how to do what they needed to on the jet, and I could trust them to do it. So when I got out, it was more so of a, who am I as a person? What can I take and build on myself, as opposed to feeling this good of the whole notion. I don't want to discourage anybody. If you want to serve, by all means, do that, but please know what you want out of it first. So.
I do want to say, so we had several folks on who are veterans who were agreeing with what you were saying, men and women. And I had both men and women who are part of the chat, just appreciating your service, but appreciating what you went through, and appreciating you guys for standing up and talking about it, both the good and the bad. And so lots of folks just commenting on, thank you very much, thanks for sharing your experiences and your opinions on us. So I convey that. I can't believe, unless you're reading the chat, it's hard to think. But that's what they were saying. Thank you so much. One person did say, agree with you, Vanessa, that their drill sergeant said basically the same thing. He said, those that are female battle buddies would be the ones bringing us down rather than males. And it's sad. It's culture based rather than gender based. So thank you so much for your time and being today. This is one of our best attended, always panel. Sorry, it's in a room that's empty. We've had this through all of our panels. Don't feel bad. Everybody's shifted to online for this whole week. We've had good attendance online, but in person. So we'll reconfigure for next year on how we do this. With lots of interest, we've been doing panels for our 2001, and that will continue. Hopefully work better as we go forward. So, thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Yeah, so thank you again for your time today, and thank you for the things that you did to help shift the culture. Because I think it happens, you know, it happens one person at a time, one interaction at a time. So thank you for doing that, for helping to shift things in the right direction to make our military a better place for everybody that serves, right? So thank you for that. Thanks again for your time today. Thank you for your service. Thank you in the audience for your service, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks.